You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, the President and CEO of BioHealth Innovation, and we're doing something new this year. We're actually going back to talk to the previous winners from our crab trap competitions that held at the BioHealth Capital Regional Forums at AstraZeneca, and doing little vignettes with the founders and CEOs of the companies who won, and a couple purposes. One is to give an update on these companies, all who have progressed significantly since they won the crab trap competition, and second of all, to try to inspire other entrepreneurs to apply for this year's competition, which will be held on October 21st. It will be virtual at 12 o'clock noon, and a lot of information will go out in the next 2 months related to crab trap. But our first winner that we had in crab trap in 2016 was David Narrow from Sonavex. David, welcome.
Thank you, Rich. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. We haven't talked for a while, and I know there's been significant progress with Sonavex, but more importantly, for people who don't know anything about you personally or the company, please introduce our listeners to a little background on David Narrow and on the company.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Rich. It's really a pleasure to be here. A little background on me. I originally was a biomedical engineer. I got my graduate degree at Hopkins through their CBID program, the Center for Bioengineering, Innovation, and Design. And then I went up to Boston to do healthcare strategy consulting for a firm called Health Advances. And technology that I was working on in graduate school continued to advance within the university. And I stayed involved and started doing some of the market research and business planning. And once the technology came to a point of maturity, I decided with my co-founders to spin that tech out of Hopkins and build Sonavex. So the whole inspiration behind Sonavex came from a reconstructive microsurgeon at Hopkins named Dr. Kuhn. So what he explained to me when I was in graduate school was basically they do these very complicated reconstructive surgeries, primarily for cancer patients, but sometimes for trauma patients, where there'll be a defect after resecting cancerous tissue. And these surgeons can do, it's pretty remarkable watching these procedures. They transplant soft tissue from one part of the body and then use that to reconstruct that missing body part. And the critical part of this 8 to 12 hour long procedure is connecting that new tissue to the adjacent blood supply. And what he said was, these procedures are very high stakes, and the rate limiting step to the success is keeping those blood vessels open because there's a high risk of a postoperative thrombosis early on when the patient's recovering. And what he said is, if we can figure out a way to detect these problems early, we can minimize the chance of one of these catastrophic failures, which right now is not only awful for the patient, but also costs the hospitals a big 6-figure expense. So we set out to figure out a solution that would help nurses at the bedside detect these problems in a timely fashion to minimize the significant morbidity and cost for patients in hospitals. So the way that the company was born is he and I came together. We started working on a solution and then started collaborating with Professor Jerry Prince at Johns Hopkins with expertise on the medical imaging analysis side. And we built a 2-part solution to enable nurses at the bedside, or really anybody without specific ultrasound training, to be able to visualize and measure blood flow in any critical blood vessel to minimize or eliminate the risk of some of these catastrophic problems.
How long did it take you to get to a proof of concept, and then how much longer to get to commercialization, David?
Well, I think it depends on what you consider a proof of concept to be. I think we thought we were pretty far along within year 1 or so, and then as you solve one problem, you uncover 2 more. So we got to a point where we felt comfortable that we had de-risked the key scientific principles within about a year or 2 of beginning this endeavor, to the point where we got to a version of a product that we knew actually performed the way that it needed to was another, I'd say, 18 months. And then the process from sort of having a functional technology that needed to go through our V&V testing to ultimately get it through the FDA added another year or so. So it was several months of testing plus another couple months with FDA. So we ended up getting 2 clearances, one for our implantable device and one for our imaging device in 2018 and 2019.
And how long did the FDA process take you from start to finish?
So we had an incredibly positive experience with the FDA. So we had 2 separate clearances. The first submission went from submission to clearance in 89 days.
Wow.
With one segment where they asked for additional information. They needed some additional context around some of the images that we had given them from the histopathology report that we had done, which really that delay would have been less if we had our pathologist turn around that information sooner. But it was an incredibly collaborative and productive relationship. We started early with them by doing a pre-submission meeting before we started spending money on all of our expensive animal testing. And, even though it's just an hour with them, they were willing to give, feedback via phone to further clarify certain critical elements of our testing strategy. And all their feedback was reasonable. Sometimes it was more expensive than we would have liked, but it was all very reasonable, and it was a great experience. And our second clearance, I forget the exact number of days, but it was between 100 and 120 days from submission to clearance. So all in all, very positive experience. We had some good counsel, and we, took a fairly aggressive approach, and it ended up paying off well.
And so where is the technology today?
So the technology is in market. We have two key indications that we're focused on. So I mentioned that sort of initial inspiration for the technology, but we've actually seen very robust interest in the dialysis access population. So for those of you who don't know, there are going to be 5 million patients on dialysis by 2025. And without getting their dialysis, they'll unfortunately, there's a 100% mortality rate within 2 weeks. So what's called their vascular access is the way that their body and bloodstream gets hooked up to a dialysis machine. And that represents their lifeline, and unfortunately has significant complications. So there are a number of ways you can get hooked up to a dialysis machine, but the preferred method is called an AV fistula, which is a fully autogenous or natural connection of a patient's own vein to their artery in their arm. And in order for that fistula to be rendered useful for dialysis, it has to basically expand in diameter and become more superficial so that A, you have adequate flow rates for the dialysis machine, but B, the dialysis tech can actually cannulate effectively. And that procedure fails to mature in 30 to 50% of cases. So it's a huge problem. Medicare spends over $28 billion a year on dialysis. And there was a very compelling clinical study that came out about 2 years ago that demonstrated that volumetric flow rate data, which is what our EchoMark and EchoSure technology provide, can predict which of these fistulas will go on to mature versus which need interventions versus which will fail. So what we're effectively able to do is really minimize the amount of time that patients are relying on catheter-based dialysis, which has very high incidence of bloodstream infections, hospitalizations. It increases mortality risk. There's a whole host of issues that come from being on a catheter, and we're able to get patients on a functioning AV fistula sooner. So we were actually awarded a large $3 million NIH grant to demonstrate the effectiveness of our technology both clinically and financially in this patient population, and are kicking off an RCT with some very prestigious institutions in the next few months here.
Congratulations. And you mentioned the $3 million NIH grant, which is non-dilutive. I know you've had some success with your financing history. Let's talk a little bit about from the beginning till today and sort of the steps you've gone through to finance the business growth.
Sure. So, when you're getting started, any tens of thousands of dollars really mean a lot. So we were very fortunate and I'd say a bit scrappy in terms of where we were able to get money from. And honestly, being in Maryland at the time, I don't think we fully appreciated how many more resources there were available to us compared to our colleagues that were in other regions. So we benefited from local programs, anything from the Maryland Innovation Initiative to the Culture Program. Obviously the Crabtrap Award was, an extra nice 5-figure check to help support some of these activities. And at the time that we had won the award, I think our balance sheet might have been about $150,000 at most. So adding an extra, 10% doesn't hurt. So early on, we were talking about tens or at most $150,000 grants from these various organizations. And that was imperative to answer some of those key scientific questions that a lot of investors are not very interested in betting on. So once we were able to get a little bit of traction from some of those grants and a little bit of visibility from programs like Crabtrap, and it was right around the time we got our first NIH grant, we were able to then really have the confidence and the data to go out and try to bring in a little bit of external capital. So we ended up raising a very small seed round from primarily local investors. The ecosystem was ultimately robust enough to be able to support our early stage needs. and we were able to de-risk and further convert these sort of scientific principles into a product. Once we got to that stage that I mentioned where some of those key risks were eliminated and we knew we just needed to follow sort of a pretty clear set of testing requirements that the FDA had agreed with us, made sense, we were able to bring in some VC money, and we did about a $5 million Series A that was able to get us to the point where we were able to do all the V&V testing, product development, manufacturing effort to really get those regulatory clearances. And then from there, we were able to continue getting additional R&D support from the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation to support those ongoing research activities in addition to the equity financing. And then since then, we've been able to bring in another round of financing to support our current limited release activities and clinical trial activities.
So it's very important for the entrepreneurs to understand it's a balance between equity funding and non-dilutive funding, going down a parallel path, because sometimes the non-dilutive funding, you can't predict when it's going to happen.
You can't predict when it's going to happen, and there are a lot of things you have to spend money on that the government's not going to let you spend that money on. And granted, a lot of, maybe over 50% of your expenses will be R&D related, but there are a lot of non-R&D related expenses that are imperative to really grow the organization and understand your different strategies. So there were really key expenses that we had early on that sort of shaped our strategy and our vision that we couldn't have done without that external capital. So you're absolutely right. Having resources from both sides was imperative.
So we're talking to David Narrow, the CEO for Sonavex, one of our first Crab Trap winners. And David, let's talk a little bit about the future. So where are you today? How many employees do you have? Talk about your offices and location. And then what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, so we're based in Baltimore, Maryland. We're right in Canton Square. We have a great space right over Dangerously Delicious Pies. So if you're ever in the area, definitely reach out and let us know. We'll share a pie. We're 12 employees right now, full time. The company is in a really exciting position right now. We have the whole second floor of this building. We're starting to grow the team. We're starting to get some really positive results from the clinicians and these folks who are really leaders in their space. And we're starting to vet a lot of the assumptions that we had made, when we were putting together this business plan to see really how the product works in real world use and building more of that clinical evidence necessary to really scale up the organization. So we're using this period to really collect all of that information and be able to really scale up, both once we have a broader arsenal of experience and market, but also have sort of COVID behind us and we're able to really be in hospitals with fewer restrictions.
You've mentioned just COVID, and I guess before we close, it would be important for people to understand how you're operating during the COVID crisis.
Yeah, so what I will say is it's tough for everyone. We were kicked out of pretty much every hospital that we were actively in initially, and it's been sort of it's been unpredictable and highly variable in terms of how we're getting back into the field. So things have started to pick back up again, but 1 week we'll get the green light and then we'll be ready to get on a plane and then we'll be told we can't come in. So it's been a challenge, absolutely. On the R&D side, it's actually presented itself with a bit of an opportunity. So fortunately, our team has transitioned fully remote. People come into the office to do certain tests and we're able to keep our distance, and the space is big enough that somebody can go do their experiment and have the whole room to themselves. And but everybody is expected to be at home unless they need to come into the office. Everybody's been very productive. It certainly helps with folks that have kids to be able to stay at home and not have to feel that pressure. And we've been able to work on some exciting new technology that will really expand the value of the business. So I will say it's just another one of the problems that gets thrown at you. 5 years ago, I would have said it would have been the most catastrophic thing ever, but the things we've had to go through over the years, it's just one more thing that you have to think about objectively and make sure that you're making the best decision you can at the time with the information you have and continue to try to execute. So I think we'll get through it. I really hope that things start to look up and that everything we're seeing with vaccine development continues its momentum. But we're hanging in there.
Well, it sounds like you're very resilient and very persistent. The heck with the patience. You've got to be persistent during these times for sure. Go forward. And one last thing, David, before we close, is how is this, as we refer to it as the BioHealth Capital Region, been for you to start a company, continue to grow your company and locate and recruit people, for the talent that you need for your business?
Yeah. So, I mean, I will say it's been a very positive experience. We've had a great ecosystem that's developed and that we're very happy to be a part of. We find that the other companies in our space are very collaborative. We share resources. We've developed great relationships. We've been able to bring in early stage capital from angel investors and meet shorter term objectives. It was a very cost effective way to bring on an adequate team to really get the job done, and had access to great institutions nearby where we had references from professors, and we really felt like we knew these people before they came in. And we found a way to make sure that when people from outside of Baltimore come through, that they really get to see the good parts of town and change any sort of negative preconceived notions that they may have before they'd come in. So we thought about it early on, like, are we going to have to ever move this business? And we thought about it for a pretty short period of time. We were able to bring these people in, we were able to execute, and we said, you know what, we're making it happen here. This is the place to be. So we have no plans of moving the business, and we've had a great time here now.
That's the best way to close, because we like people that want to stay, David. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we haven't lost that many people recently because there's more money flowing into the region right now. If you look just in the last probably 2 months, we've had over $3 billion of COVID money come into this region to just show how important we are to everybody in the world. And it just really shining a light on really how much Maryland means to our biohealth ecosystem globally.
That's right. Yeah, it's been very impressive, and I've been loving following all the news you guys share on Tuesdays.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have been doing a little brief update with David Narrow, our first Crab Trap winner from 2016. And as a reminder to everybody that's listening, we're going to have another Crab Trap competition. It's going to be October 21st virtually, 12 o'clock. And we have unbelievable judges, just like we have had every year. And I would imagine David would encourage all to apply, because the application process is one where you actually get feedback, even if you're not selected to be a presenter. The 5 finalists that we will select actually get a little mentoring before they make their pitches to the judges. So it's a very positive experience for all, and we hope that we have a number of new people entering this competition this year. So David Narrow, CEO of Sonavex and our first Crab Trap winner, thank you for giving us the update. And we need to get you engaged as a mentor or a judge sometime in the future, David.
I'd love that, Rich. Call me anytime.
Great. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Take care.
And today we're going to talk to our 2018 winner, which is Galen Robotics. And we actually have the dynamic duo here with us today. We have Bruce Lichorowic, who is the CEO. And then we have Dave Saunders, who's also a co-founder. Bruce and Dave, and we'd love to get an update. But before we get into updating, I think it would be good for the listeners to hear what the history of Galen Robotics is and bring us from the beginning fast forward to where we are today.
So basically, at Johns Hopkins, a lot of otolaryngologists and neurosurgeons were regularly coming into the robotics research area and asking for a robot that really fit into a category of needs that no other robot on the market today is satisfying. And so the result of all of that was the development of a surgical robot that literally fits into the surgical areas that the other more common surgical robots cannot go. And that gives us a very wide range of utilities. All you can see here, a number of tools. Our system here is designed to hold any of these instruments and to work with the surgeon in a cooperative manner to give them an extremely stable tool, as well as a number of safety and precision enhancements that we feel will translate to a wide variety of benefits, not only for the hospital and the surgeon, but also for patient care itself.
And so when was it conceived at Johns Hopkins, and how many people were involved as co-founders?
Sure. The technology itself has been under development for about 8 to 10 years. And depending on how you follow the timeline, it might even go back further than that. Johns Hopkins, as many people know, is the home of Dr. Russell Taylor, who is the father of all surgical robots. So you follow the development of any robot out there, and all the paths kind of lead back to Dr. Taylor. And this was a project by one of his PhD students, and it began as just a small tabletop version that was the prototype that was shown to Bruce and I when we founded the company in 2016.
Super. So you and Bruce, I'd assume you didn't come through the Johns Hopkins arena, right?
Actually, Tech Ventures, Johns Hopkins Technical Ventures reached out to us and asked us to take a look at this. Dave and I were in orthopedics before, and we knew the CEO at the time of Tech Ventures, Neil Veloso, who we had known in a prior life, and said, is your team still available? And you want to take a look at another robot? And we said, sure. And so we came out, we met with Russ, and we looked at the market, and we saw in the space that we're going into, which is neuro and ENT, which is really head and neck, anything above the shoulders, the white space is quite open. The competition is very minimal. Most of the robots in the market today for surgical robots is mostly in orthopedic. So, and neurosurgery really being the home where all of it was invented here at Hopkins, it made sense that this would be the place surgical robot for neurosurgery would be invented. So we were invited to come in, and we looked at everything with 41 patents filed. The team that Russ, or at least the engineers that Russ was working with, the students, the PhDs were world class, and we just our team along out of Silicon Valley. So, as a matter of fact, we just moved to Baltimore 8 months ago. So we just moved our company to Baltimore out of Silicon Valley to take advantage of some of the benefits and incentives out of the state that they're offering us.
Well, welcome to the BioHealth Capital Region, and we think this will be very good and successful move for you back here, because it's really on the move back here in this region. And I don't know if you follow it much, but Genetic Engineering News does rankings of all the major bioclusters annually. This region, which we call BioHealth Capital Region, is Maryland, DC, and Virginia. It was ranked 6th about 5 years ago, and now we're 4th. And so you have Boston, San Francisco, New York, and now you guys are going to help bring us forward to become number 3 and bypass New York one of these days. So welcome. I'm glad you're in the region. So let's go through some of the critical milestones. You talk about the startup in 16. What were some of the major milestones of the company that sort of brought us to where we are today?
Sure. Well, one of the very first things that we did when we began all of this was to make the first prototype that just kind of looked a little bit more like something you would roll into the operating room. And so we began working immediately on developing that prototype. And we took it to the otolaryngology conference in Chicago in October or September of 2017. And we got hands-on demo time with over 70 department heads of otolaryngology centers from around the world. Now, what we found was really, I think, validating, and a little bit of it was a bit of a sore spot. What we found clinically was that all of these otolaryngology surgeons could immediately identify how this system could be beneficial to them, to residents, to students, just across the board. They really saw the value of it very, very quickly from the moment they put their hands on the system. And this isn't the one that we took with us to Chicago, but what we did find out about it, that particular prototype was it was a little on the ugly side, so we had an eyesore issue. And also the ergonomics didn't quite fit some of our goals for integrating a system like this into an OR where you already have, say, a surgical microscope, maybe you've got a laser, a nerve monitor, all kinds of other gear. clustering for room around the operating table, we needed to have something that could just slide in there, take up not much more room than a single person standing beside the table. So we went back to the drawing board, and we devised another prototype, which we've got here. And this gave us actually more benefits than the previous prototype. We call this the Mark II. And with the Mark II, we end up with a range of motion that allows us to support a variety of tools from, say, very small, this is actually a hand tool for doing middle ear surgery, specifically something called a staphodotomy, and larger instruments like a pedicle screwdriver, which are often a little bit difficult to hold perfectly straight for spine surgeons. And yet they're not looking for like all kinds of fancy navigated guidance, things like that. We're able to provide very, very simple benefits for a very, very wide range of instruments. It just depends on what instrument the surgeon chooses to hold with it. So this is the prototype we've got here. We're making a small change to it, and that will be called the Mark III. And we're then distributing this in parallel to our efforts to file with the FDA for approval about this time next year. We are distributing these to Johns Hopkins, the actual university lab. We're putting one in the Carnegie Center at the hospital, and hopefully also sending one up to Mass General for some clinical testing up there. So we're in the final runway approach here to take this technology to the FDA and turn it into a product.
Well, that's pretty exciting, and I'm sure it's great to have a partner like Johns Hopkins, where you have the living laboratory in your backyard and a great partner to work with.
It's, Johns Hopkins is just in so many ways an underappreciated institution in the U.S. I mean, the amount of technology development being done out of Johns Hopkins is just shocking to me at times. You've got APL, you've got Dr. Taylor's robotics research, you've got an incredible computer science group, and then all the liberal arts as well. It's a really top-notch university, and I feel very privileged that we've got such a close working relationship with them.
That's super. Now, Bruce, it's not cheap to try to develop robotic tools to help surgeons. So what have you done to help finance Galen Robotics from your start in 2016 till today?
Well, this is Dave's and mine, fourth startup. So we kind of had a cadre of investors who follow us. At the same time, we've raised $7 million already just in our seed round. In fact, it was oversubscribed. And so, and as I mentioned before, we are opening up our series. We were going to open up our Series A in February. COVID hit, so we're reopening it up next month, September, to get our day going. So, we've been, lucky. We've been fortunate. We have some very well-heeled investors who have come in. We haven't done a formal round. So everything's all basically convertible note. So basically the deal's clean for an investor, and we'll have our Series A lead or co-lead, price the round, and we'll go from there.
Now, I heard one of you mention something about the numerous programs in Maryland, and I heard you talk about an MII, which really helped in the very early stages. Did you work with TEDCO or the state or any of the other funds in addition to the well-heeled individuals or investors that you have for part of your financing?
Well, the reason why Dave and I moved here is the state and the city approached us and asked, would we consider moving the company here? And we kind of said, send us a proposal. We'll take a look at it. We have a draft proposal from Kelly Schultz. Here's a signature from the Secretary of Commerce, and Colin Talbert, head of BDC here in this Baltimore Development Corp. And so there are a number of incentives for aid or an assistance for facilities. There's a ton of tax incentives per head that we hire. Now, we're a group of 26, 25 people right now. We plan on going to about 150 people by the end of next year. So we will definitely grow. And we're also located in a zone. So we're in an opportunity zone in downtown Baltimore at the Wycomico building, which gives us further benefits from the state. And so we're taking advantage of it all. Now, also, almost $1 million has been returned back to our investors from the biotech incentive investor program. So we applied for that for the first time this year for fiscal year last year. And so all our investors who applied and qualified will have received their tax certificate to be applied in their taxes next year to get half their rebate or half their investment back of what they put in. So that's been a tremendous success. So, as a CEO, you get offered all these programs. I mean, we got offered programs from North Carolina, from Arizona, from Texas, Ohio. And, some, were like, yeah, sure. But we gave Maryland a shot. And quite honestly, we wanted to be next to Hopkins. Hopkins, like Dave said, is an incredible resource, not only for technology, but also for talent. Dave runs a intern program every year, where last year 13 interns from Hopkins and surrounding schools come in to work hands-on with the robot. And then we've done that program now 2 years in a row. So the first class of interns, all of them when they graduated. We're hiring some now as they graduated last year. So it's a great bench to bring in talent, keep talent here, because once these kids graduate with their PhD and master program, they're gone. They don't stay. So, in fact, I was letting the state, we actually compete against Google. We compete against Facebook. We compete against those companies in the West Coast for this type of talent, because 85% of a robot is software. So those software engineers, we have to provide a pretty good home for, give them career counseling, take them, we bring them under, and plus the fact that they helped us in their internship, they have a familiarity with the robot and everything. So when we offer them their offer letter, normally we have a fairly high rate that they come on board.
You are a walking advertisement for why people should be in Maryland, actually. When you look at the science and the technology here, a lot of people talk about incentives and programs, and I look at them all over the United States, just like you do, because we have to compare and where are we strong, where are we weak, and really soup the nuts when you look at all the way down to pre-commercial research at academic institutions to when you're getting into the commercial world. And then the biotechnology investor tax credit program in Maryland is very unique. Companies we work with take advantage of it. And actually, I'm an investor in one of those. And one of the things you could do is tell your investors to reinvest the money back rather than get a check back. That way, they can just keep the money back in the company and keep it growing for their investment. But I think that you just summarized one of the good reasons to land in Baltimore and in Maryland, Bruce. And I think your message hopefully will resonate with other companies. And normally what we don't do in these little short interviews is a demo, but I understand Dave has the ability on this Zoom call to do a quick demo, or not, Dave?
Sure, no problem.
I mean, if we can do a quick one, that would be very interesting for the listeners to see something unique, because we're talking to a very unique company as well.
Well, let me just give you a quick rundown. So what we're looking at here, these are surgical instruments that a surgeon would already be using. So for example, this would be used for vocal cord surgery. So it's a relatively long instrument, very, very delicate. It's going to go down your throat for vocal cord surgery. And one of the challenges that occurs with that is you're holding it back here and the tip is up here. And you're dealing with very, very small soft tissue anatomy. And even your own heartbeat is actually going to put a little bit of a wiggle on the end of the instrument. And that effectively limits your dexterity. Now, obviously, these surgeons have learned ways to mitigate things like tool stability issues. And sometimes we say the word hand tremor, but surgeons don't like that phrase. So we tend to avoid it. But in a nutshell here, the idea was, and this is something that the surgeons led for the design of this robot, is, incidentally, that was how easy it is to attach the instrument to the robot. We attach the instrument, and then we go and we use it like we normally would. And so let me just change cameras here really quick. If you can see this little gizmo with all the colors here, this is relatively small anatomy. You can see it kind of beside my hand, and we can move the instrument down here and we could access, so this could be a polyp or a cyst on your vocal cords. This could be the middle of your ear for cochlear implants, for staphotomies. These are all, incidentally, anticipated benefits of this technology. We are still pre-FDA, so I'm showing you what we anticipate as benefits. But this gives us the ability to allow the surgeon to still be in 100% control. So the surgeon is moving their hand. The surgeon is moving the instrument. The robot, with a very, very sensitive sensor right up here on the wrist of the robot, is feeling those hand motions. Just like your steering wheel feels you pull this way or that way, and then there's a mechanical linkage system that actually turns your wheels. It's the same thing here. The robot feels your hand motions, and technically it's the robot that's moving the instrument, but it is still under surgeon control. And the benefit that we get out of that is now this tool is rock solid steady. So I can use this in my working hand, as we would call it for surgeons. And this could be my hand that is going to make an incision in my vocal cord. This could be the hand that is, let me show you just a quick, just a little zippy video here. This could be a drill that is drilling the mastoid bone behind your ear, which is the hardest bone in the human body. And that's about 90 minutes worth of cutting time to get access for middle ear surgery. So we could be holding a very, very wide range of instruments and provide stability, very, very tight hand control. And according to a study that was published by one of the department heads at Johns Hopkins 2 years ago, when using an instrument like this, from the moment the surgeon began using the instrument held by the Galen, we measured an almost 3x boost in their hand dexterity. Now, that should translate to a wide variety of steps in surgeries where a surgeon could benefit, perhaps by just flattening the performance curve, by ensuring the tool is always doing what the surgeon wants it to do. That right there is a huge savings. But something that we also anticipate as a potential benefit is that if your hands are this certain and this rock solid steady, it should translate to faster motions and therefore shorter times in surgery, less time for the OR, which means less expense, less time for the patient under anesthesia, which is a big win for them. And there might even be some steps in surgeries that some surgeons don't do under normal circumstances that they would now actually be willing to do as a matter of course because they know their instrument is so rock solid steady. So it's really that simple. And, you know, in a procedure, and it would take me too long to step through this, but in a middle ear procedure, there could be 4 different instruments and 4 distinct steps of a surgery where you would simply change the instrument on the Galen's arm and then begin to do that particular step of the procedure. Whereas you look at a lot of surgical robots on the market today, and they do one thing. And they take about 40 to 45 minutes of setup time just to do that one thing. And that just wasn't something that Bruce and I would have been interested in. We were looking for surgical robotics and, the broader means of computer interventional surgery that brings benefits to surgeons' hands through multiple critical steps of a procedure and not just one single step. So this gives us all of that in a form factor that is roughly the amount of floor space that a person would take up standing beside the table. That was a really important design consideration for all of the surgeons that provided input into the design of this system. So it's basically, the size of a large filing cabinet. You roll it right up to the side of the operating table, you put the instrument in its hand, and you're basically ready to go.
Well, Doug, thank you for that. I can tell you have no passion for what you're doing. And you don't believe in the instrument. But, what I'd like to do is come back to both of you at a later date, and we could do a longer interview and talk a lot more about some of the technology associated with this, because it's really exciting what you're doing, and especially being transplants from Silicon Valley back into this region. And with what you've accomplished, to summarize, basically, doing a startup in 2016, having raised about $7 million pre-Series A, growing to 25 people with that in this region, and then also making significant progress towards your FDA approval, which I guess you're shooting for in 2021, some version of the Galen 3 probably. So yeah, so this is pretty exciting, and I wish we had more time today, but we will come back. And I want to remind you that as you're getting ready for your 20 million Series A, we will have our investor conference the 20th and 21st with people you know well already, JP Morgan and Wilson Sonsini, who are our primary sponsors. So we're going to invite you to that investor conference so that you can get some good exposure for your company. And also, we want to congratulate you with your progress. Also, congrats on being a 2018 winner for Crab Trap. And hopefully this will stimulate people out there who are saying, well, what's this Crab Trap all about, and what's it do for us? So hopefully the check wasn't what the key was for Crab Trap. It was the exposure you got with the people who came in contact at the competition. Is that true?
It is true. It's part of the ecosystem. Just even getting into the local area and becoming more known was a huge benefit for the Crab Trap event and the effort that went into presenting for it. The check and the trophy are awesome too. They've got a really great place of special honor. But you're absolutely right. It's that opportunity for people to know you and to be in a setting where they get to see, ask questions, hear questions that other people are asking, and just get that overall ecosystem from the local environment. It's very important for any business.
So if anybody wants more information on Galen, tell us how they would get in touch with you.
Probably the easiest way to do it is go to our website, www.galenrobotics.com.
Super. And I'm sure that either one of you would be responsive to anybody that had more questions or interest in learning more about the company.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. So thank you. Anything else you want to close with, Bruce? Because I know that with Doug's passion there, you might not get everything in that you'd like to get in.
No, Dave is our pro nerd. We call him our pro nerd, so he really gets excited about this stuff. But
okay, so
we probably are a good poster child for some of the programs that actually do work for this area. I mean, I was 3 decades living in Silicon Valley. Dave was 12 years living there. To pull us out, have us sell our homes, and actually move here was a big deal. It had to be something that was significant. And the only thing that's we kind of complain about is the humidity. So outside of that, it's
well, you have some oceans over here. Or some bays if you want to go into them, if you want to get wet, cool off a little bit. So, well, congratulations to both of you. We've been talking with Bruce and Dave, co-founders of Galen Robotics and past winners in Crab Trap. And if you don't mind, we're going to follow up with you and do something a little longer in the future, and maybe even do a case history on you that we might be able to
That'll be fun.
do an interview, because we could put that into our BioHealth Innovation News, and I think it's a story worth telling that more people need to know about. So congrats very much.
We have the CEO and co-founder of Floreo, and that's Vijay Ravindran, who's going to be our guest and give us a little update on everything that's happened with Floreo since he won Crab Trap. And I know that probably was the event that catapulted you into the world, right, Vijay?
It was a wonderful event. It's definitely the coolest trophy I've ever received. And I'm including all of my soccer and tennis trophies growing up.
Yeah, super. Yeah. Well, for the listeners who haven't seen it, it's actually a physical crab trap with a crab inside of it that is not live at this point. But anyway, Vijay, a lot of people probably have never heard of Floreo. And if they weren't at the Bio Conference Bio Forum to see you, they really don't know what you do. So I think the best place we're going to start today, let's do a little background on yourself personally, and then a little introduction to the company. And all the listeners will get a little intro to Floreo and Vijay.
Yeah, thanks, Rich, for having me. And we had such a delightful time last year presenting. So, my name is Vijay Ravindran. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Floreo. And background-wise, I'm a software engineer by background. Probably most notably, I was an early software engineer at Amazon. I joined in 1998 and was there for 7 years in a variety of engineering roles, including leading the collection of teams that were responsible for consumer purchasing. So when you interact with features like the Amazon shopping cart, those were all areas that I knew intimately well back in the old days. I even also led the team that launched Amazon Prime back in 2005.
Which we all use every day now.
Yeah, kind of hard to believe. When we launched that, there were days that 4 or 5 people signed up for it. So now it's a giant thing. So,
well, I'm sure in 2005 you bought Amazon stock too, right, Vijay?
Thankfully, everyone at Amazon back in those days were well compensated with stock. But could we have predicted the rise of the Amazon stock 10 years later? Probably not. But no complaints there. I moved to Washington, D.C. I did a very D.C. thing. I got involved in democratic politics and helped build a data mining company called Catalyst, which is still going today and supports left-leaning organizations on voter targeting and campaigning. And then I was at the Washington Post for 7 years. And I was at the Washington Post through the sale of the newspaper to, not coincidentally, Jeff Bezos, and ended up actually working on the transaction from the Graham family side. Stayed with the Graham Holdings company, which owns properties like Kaplan, and that's actually where the story begins for Floreo. I was noodling around with the Oculus DK1 virtual reality headset, and the Samsung Gear VR had just come out, and I asked my son to try it out, and he tried it out, and he's on the autism spectrum, and he had an incredibly positive engagement with the device, and then actually started engaging some pretend play, which I'd never seen before. And so that spurred the idea that Floreo could, or VR specifically, could be an interventional medium for delivering therapy for kids like him. And the idea was born, and Floreo was started back in 2016.
Oh, that's super. And how did you come up with the name Floreo?
Yeah, Floreo means blossom in Latin, so it's the root word of flourish, and the idea at the time was we were looking for names for the company that would signify helping every kid reach their full potential.
And very appropriate, right?
Yeah. So so the name has been one of our strong suits and our logo, but we started with building virtual reality scenes to help spur social and behavioral development, and we targeted common areas of developmental delay in different types of skills. So they range from building block skills like eye contact to peer-to-peer conversational skills and safety skills like how to cross the street, how to interact with strangers or law enforcement. And then also lessons around emotional regulation. So how to relax, how to practice mindfulness, tactics that can really help a child succeed who might otherwise be more prone to outbursts or being upset. And so part of our IP is that we created a software-based system for linking the virtual reality experience with a coaching console that runs on an iPad today. And that iPad enables a supervising adult, which is mostly a therapist or a special education teacher, sometimes a parent, to be able to coach the child in real time, be able to provide pointers, interact with them, see what they're seeing in VR, and collect valuable data. That data plus what we collect in the VR environment is then fed back into being able to recommend new lessons, chart progress, and then be able to be used as a baseline to spur other treatments.
And then who were some of the early adopters, and who's your primary target audience for customers?
Yeah, our first adopter was a special education school in New Jersey, and autism is different than a lot of other medical diagnoses in that the treatments for autism are delivered both by the healthcare system through what you would think of as normal treatment for healthcare clinics that are able to bill your insurance, et cetera, but also through special education in the classrooms. So we work with both, and we started working with a school in New Jersey, and then that expanded to a couple of different special education licenses initially. And then as our research started rolling in and showing promising signs of efficacy, we've been able to expand into therapy clinic businesses as well. And so today I would say it's about 60% therapy clinics, 40% special education school districts. And we definitely have an emphasis around the therapy clinics as we continue to grow the company.
And what's your marketing strategy with an emerging entrepreneurial company?
Yeah, so we have done most of our sales with no sales team. We use performance marketing, targeting decision makers at therapy clinics or in the special education school system roles, and we really play upon the fact that this is a new and engaging way that's research backed to help a child who is going through developmental delays. Furthermore, since March, with the pandemic, we were able to, we had been working on for over a year and a half a capability that enabled the coaching console to run remotely from the VR headset. And so we were able to start touting our telehealth capability as the pandemic hit. And today, the majority of our license revenue is for this telehealth style of delivery.
So the pandemic has almost caused you to pivot the direction you were going with the company, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it was always in our plans, but it definitely has accelerated touting this telehealth capability that we knew would be important in the context of delivering services to rural parts of the country. But as so many other things have been gigantically disrupted, special education is really not the same if you're doing distance learning. And, it's very difficult for families to bring kids into the clinic, given all the concerns around COVID. And autism therapy especially is something that is done in close proximity. So as soon as you introduce social distancing and masks, you're really creating a very different experience than what most kids. And so the option to use virtual reality and to use it in a completely safe and effective way has been attractive for us as we start talking to customers during this pandemic.
And there's been a lot of technological development with VR in the last 5 years since you started. So talk a little bit about that progression and how that's impacted your product offering.
Yeah, I think when we started, the main form of virtual reality that everyone had seen was the New York Times free placement of headsets and using Google Cardboard, which was this very simple standard that allows most Android and iPhones to go into a virtual reality mode and use inexpensive holders. And that is how our product continues to be deployed, mainly because we see cost of accessibility of this, especially in the context of schools. And many clinics are mom and pop operations. They're not big corporate entities. So we try to keep costs low when we use it. the industry itself has made gigantic strides, and while we track it, we haven't yet found exactly the best entry point to upgrade the hardware we run on. The Oculus Quest is really a standard now for virtual reality. It brings full motion track controllers and full positional tracking of the person into free space without any external peripherals tracking you. It's using outbound sensors in the headset itself to do that positional tracking, and that's quite a bit more sophisticated than what we use today with our main offering, which is simply using the accelerometers in the phones to create display updates based on how the head moves. So we're tracking the space. It's moving rapidly. You have on the market now also new headsets that do retina level eye tracking, which is particularly relevant in the space we're in. So the technology has continued to move forward. I think the challenge in our space, which is a pediatric space essentially, is that in addition to costs, the weight of the headset is very important to keep low. Kids with autism typically have low muscle tone and have neck strength challenges. And so we have remained on smartphone-based virtual reality, both because it keeps the cost down, but also because it continues to be the most practical way of delivery to this population. One thing we have done, though, is, and this is the development since our presentation last year at CrabTrap, is that we've started working with hardware resellers who can provide refurbished equipment, and we have realized that for many of our customers, downloading an app in the App Store and procuring your own hardware was one too many steps to introduce to the purchasing flow. And so our enterprise customers today, when they sign up, also have the option of leasing equipment. The equipment comes with Floreo pre-installed. Everything's also locked down. Because we use smartphones, for many of our enterprise customers, they were concerned that those smartphones could be misused in different ways by the people who come into contact with them. And so even though we're using commodity hardware today, an iPad, an iPhone, they are managed through Apple Business Manager to be locked down, and it's really enterprise equipment that's being delivered that only runs Floreo.
Right. Well, a lot of progress has been made, and I'm speaking with Vijay Ravindran, who's the CEO of Floreo, and last year's CrabTrap winner. And also, most entrepreneurial early stage companies have challenges in funding their company as they're growing. How have you funded the company, and what kind of strategic partners have you developed in your early days, Vijay?
Yeah, great question. So, our most initially, the first year of the company, I funded myself and was able to, bring a couple of people on board and get that MVP built and start being able to shop something around. We've been able to raise a little over $4 million in venture since then through a convertible note and a seed preferred round. The seed preferred round came in shortly after we won the CrabTrap competition, and was led by a great partner for us, Penumbra, which is a stroke medical device company that has made its own significant investment in virtual reality for stroke rehab. And so they led the round. And as far as important strategic partners, it really starts with a partnership with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And we won a 3-year NIH Fast Track grant that has enabled us to do really groundbreaking research at the intersection of virtual reality and children. And we finished the first year of a randomized controlled trial, and it went really well. And then the final year of the grant has been, of course, like most research, been severely disrupted by the pandemic. And we just got an extension grant from the NIH to pick it up in a socially distant, compliant way. So we'll be doing that. And thankfully, we'll be taking advantage of some of the teletherapy capabilities in the system, which also is beneficial from a research standpoint. We'd love to see the teletherapy version researched as well. Other partners that have turned out to be important, a recent one that's very important is CompuClaim, which is a company based in Rhode Island, and they have a very important product that is fairly niche, which is that they provide billing systems to school districts to bill Medicaid, and that's really important strategically because we see state-based Medicaids as a key growth path for the company. About half of special needs kids in the U.S. receive some services from Medicaid, and so it's an important conduit for various services to be delivered to the population that we care about. And we've been fortunate enough to receive approval in Maryland for Medicaid reimbursement through their Autism Waiver Exception program. And so we're working now with service coordinators in Maryland to start reaching out to families that are part of that program. We have approval now in DC as well, and we're in varying stages at a number of states. So we see state Medicaid programs as a way to be able to offer a reimbursed version of the product that can be delivered in a few different ways. And that's really to also then support the enterprise programs we already have in place, selling to schools and clinics. These same schools and clinics can also potentially access the Medicaid reimbursement to create even a stronger value proposition to licensing what we've done.
So public health becomes a marketing extension for the company, really.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty exciting. And as you continue to grow, most companies always have an insatiable appetite for more capital. Tell me where you are and your future plans for growth.
Yeah, so we have an insatiable appetite for new capital. We think we're well positioned now, having established the autism product with support research now and a growing base of enterprise customers. And the state Medicaid approvals that we have in hand and will have soon are reflective of the unique and legitimate capability that we now have on the market to help families. And so, we see our next stage really around a few different things. The first is, further professionalizing our sales and marketing into the autism market, using the state Medicaid reimbursements as springboards to continue to fuel growth. The second is, deepening the telehealth opportunity. So there's so much more to be done, both with synchronous telehealth, which we're doing right now in the way that we stream the view of what the child is seeing in VR to the iPad and enable, live coaching over distance, but also in asynchronous telehealth, where we can potentially create the conduits for remote patient monitoring and enabling families to be able to step into therapy in a monitored remote manner. So we think that's a very powerful way to empower families, especially as they go through the challenges of the pandemic. The third area that's really important is that we just recently announced a direct partnership with NIH through the National Human Genome Research Institute. We're partnering with the research division there directly to develop a new set of ADHD treatment. And so they'll be funding the research and validation side, as well as advising us on the design, which they're doing right now actively. And we hope to have lessons for ADHD treatment available at the end of the year to be able to expand on our existing autism catalog. That catalog has grown mightily. So I think when I presented at Crab Trap, we were at about 25 to 30 lessons. We now have over 175 lessons in the catalog and growing. So every month we're releasing new content, and we've really boiled it down now to an assembly line within the company where we can take therapy ideas into reality very quickly.
That's excellent. And then you mentioned to me that also you're going to be in the process of doing what would be classified as a Series A financing for the company, right?
That's what we're looking. That'll be the next stage. We did the seed preferred last summer, and we will be looking at opportunities to grow the company on those dimensions. So. We're excited about the story we have to tell and what we've accomplished to date, and the opportunity, especially in light of what the world is going through with the pandemic and the particular challenge that families with kids with special needs are going through.
Well, congratulations on your progress. And, we're going to incorporate the Crab Trap for 2020 into our investor conference this year. And so that might be another platform for you. It's going to be October 20th and 21st. It's going to be virtual. We're going to invite about 100 companies and about 40 to 50 investors. Crab Trap is going to actually be on October 21st at 12 o'clock virtually this year. We'll invite 5 more companies and have our robust panel of judges again looking for the next Floreo. So you're free to tune into that, but we'll get you an invitation to the investor conference to see if we can stimulate any interest in your Series A that you're going to be doing.
That would be wonderful. We'd appreciate it.
Great. So we've been chatting with Vijay Ravindran, who is the CEO and co-founder of Floreo and the 2019 winner of Crab Trap, and who has made significant progress since he started the company in 2016. We wish you the best going forward, and it seems like you are surviving the pandemic extremely well, and which has actually created some new business opportunities and pivoting for your company on this telehealth and remote basis that we're in. So you're a true entrepreneur that's taking advantage of the unfortunate opportunity and environment that we're in, Vijay.
Thank you for having me, Rich. Really
Yep. Thank you, and good luck in the future.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.